Thank you all for joining us for our SICSS-Howard-Mathematica Roundtable entitled Getting the Most Out of SICSS-Howard-Mathematica. I will introduce Todd Hall and Regina Ebo, our alumni teaching fellows, who will introduce the panel and our speakers.
Welcome to this roundtable discussion with SICSS alumni of color. My name is Todd Hall, also a SICSS alum. During these Real Talk roundtables, our hosting organizations, Howard-Mathematica and SICSS, discuss the experiences of people of color within their institutions and offer tips and tricks for success. In the case of our SICSS panel today, Nanette will be moderating a discussion between 3 alumni of color from the 2021 SICSS-Howard-Mathematica location. And I'm especially excited about these folks, really everyone, but Felix Owusu and I went to the same undergrad. Maxine had one of my favorite memories or moments from SICSS, where she asked who was the least comfortable with R and asked if they were comfortable sharing their screen, and we just really supported each other.
Love it.
And Janeria is now one of my collaborators. So these are really awesome folks. We have a lot to talk about, but if you haven't had your lunch yet, please feel free to hit pause. For those of you with a food or beverage in hand, we will get started. And we'll begin by introducing our panelists, and I'll turn it over to Regina Ebo.
Hi, so I'll start first with our first panelist, Janeria Easley. Janeria is an assistant professor of African American Studies at Emory University. Dr. Easley is trained as a sociologist and a demographer. She studies neighborhoods, wealth, and other racialized barriers to economic well-being. Our next panelist is Felix Owusu. He's a postdoctoral research fellow at the program in Clinical Justice Policy and Management in the Malcolm Weiner Center for Social Policy at Harvard Kennedy School. Trained as an economist, his research blends data science, experimental and quasi-experimental research designs, and deep substantive knowledge to understand the application of law and bureaucratic processes in law enforcement agencies and their impacts across race and class. He also recently served as a data scientist in the Metropolitan Police Department and the lab at DC in Washington, DC, where he helped evaluate public safety interventions and spearheaded the effort to produce and publicly release administrative data on police stops in the District of Columbia. And our last panelist is Maxine Van Doren. She's a licensed speech and language pathologist and a PhD candidate in the linguistics at the University of California, San Diego. Her dissertation examines the effects of language structure on voice quality in speakers with and without voice disorders. Clinically, she's interested in developing linguistically informed diagnostic tools for culturally and linguistically diverse patients with voice disorders. I'm really excited to get this discussion going, so I'll now pass it on to Nanette to start us off with a couple questions.
Thank you, Regina and Todd. I want to ask our panelists to drop your email addresses in the chat box so we can keep our networking going. I think we have at least one alum in the, another alum in the audience. So I think Roshan is there too. So any alums who are joining us, please drop your emails in the chat box as well. All of our participants, we now have a document with everybody's 3 research words and bios from both classes. So you all may want a suggestion. Start collecting email addresses and maybe put all this together, right? That could be useful, right? Okay, so let's jump on in. I am very excited about this gathering, and just want to say we're working towards 100% participation from our alums from last year, and that will be an expectation for next year. Let's start with some questions. So I'm going to throw this out. Anyone can answer it. Feel free to unmute, talk over each other. You know how fun this is without raising hands. And I want to tell our participants that I have about 5 questions, but I would love it if you'd interrupt me and I could hand it over to you and you could ask some questions. So as soon as you have one, get those hands up and we'll start working you in. So our first question to our alumni on how to get the most out of this, we'd love to, what drew you to SICSS? So you decided to apply to SICSS and particularly our location. So what drew you to SICSS and particularly our site?
I can go first. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So I'll say that for me, when I found out about SICSS, I found out about the Howard site. And so the combination of the program and doing this at Howard and having this experience to meet some really amazing people in a space that you don't always see Black scholars and other scholars of color as much represented, which is really exciting to me. So I was really honored to be chosen and really excited. And it was more than I even imagined. So really excited that I got to do it.
So same, when I found out about SICSS, I found out about the Howard site, and it was 2 or 3 days before the application deadline. And I stayed up all night doing my application. But I had taken, I don't know, maybe 3 stats classes at this point in my graduate career. And before I started grad school, I thought I hated math and I hated anything technology related, and I wasn't good at it. And then I started taking these classes and I realized, wow, computation is so powerful and we're using it everywhere. And so if I don't apply this to my research and I don't understand it, I'm going to be left behind. And I'm not going to have anything to say about all this research that's coming out and all these new tools that are being developed that have an effect on our lives. So that's why I applied.
Hello all. Similar story over here. I found out about SICSS and the Howard-Mathematica site at the same time. I was in DC at the time, and Howard and Mathematica are institutions that I have a lot of respect for. And I'm somebody who does quantitative work, generally. I was initially really interested in building community and meeting people who had, I think, different perspectives. I think a lot of people who have computational backgrounds often aren't thinking about the same issues that I am, or are not thinking about them in the ways that I think are the most insightful. And so I really wanted to learn from people who I thought had what is often missing in these conversations. And I think I was exposed to people who were doing really interesting research, in areas that I wasn't exposed to at all, given the context that I was coming from. And so that was a big motivation for me. And I also just knew that I had a lot to learn. Even though I did quantitative work, the space is super broad. And I learned a ton, and there were tools that I had not used or not been exposed to that I just got in the classes. So I think just like the core experience of going through it was useful as well. So that's what brought me here.
Do we get everybody in there? Yep. Everybody answer? Okay, great. All right. So can you talk about what have been your greatest challenges and biggest rewards after attending SICSS?
I can say when I applied to SICSS and was deciding whether I could make time for it, I was trying to finish up my dissertation and was very much in like trying to finish mode. And I made the time anyway because I thought it was worth it. And this is the kind of thing that I didn't know if I'd be able to find similar opportunities. So I shot my shot. But I think after SICSS, going into dissertation mode, would say I think qualifies as both a biggest challenge and a biggest sort of triumph in that I did finish. And I think I finished with a lot more wind in my sails, given what is otherwise a really stressful time, having come from this kind of experience. And so being able to come up for air and do this was great. But yeah, dissertations are hard, as I'm sure you guys all know or are finding out. And so I'm gonna name that.
I can go next. My greatest reward, I think, so I've been working with another SICSS alum on a project to build a language model that predicts sentiment of African-American English tweets. And I can go on about why we need that, but I can also go on about the biggest challenges. You get a good baseline of the computational skills that you're interested in during SICSS, and the challenge has been building on that to actually be able to do the project. So it's been kind of a slow, steady project because we're learning each step of the way as we do. The other biggest reward is I really felt emboldened after SICSS to reach out to people. I don't know why. That was just one of the side effects of attending. And so when I see something really interesting or somebody doing something cool, I just reach out to them and ask if they'll, meet with me about it. And they'll talk. Usually people are really nice. They want to talk about what they're doing. So that's been an unexpected and great reward of attending.
So for me, I'll start with the rewards too. Definitely this project that I'm doing with Todd Hall and Jeremy Prim, that's been an amazing experience. We were able to get SICSS funding as well. We're probably going to apply to get some more funding now that we know that it's available. But it's really exciting. It's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, which makes it even more exciting because I don't do a lot of work on education. So I'm really excited about that. Another reward was just like having such a clear picture of what data science is. It was something that I was interested in, but when I came in, I thought data science was like web scraping. And then you find out that it's all these other things and that even web scraping is not even the most common thing that people do. So it was exciting to have a sense about that. And then also, I feel like I took a lot of lessons from this. And so we're starting a graduate program here at Emory in African American Studies. And I would like to bring some of what we learned into the program for students to really support the interdisciplinary work. In terms of challenges, so I want to shout out if there are any parents in the room, because I had to do SICSS with my son home, which was really interesting. So between that and then being on Zoom for a whole week at a time, it was the first time that I had ever done that. So that was a challenge, but everyone made it really easy and really enjoyable. And I think that was something that was really unique for this site. And you might see my son in the background because he's home because his daycare is closed for Juneteenth. So still having that experience.
We would love to see your son on camera. Please have him come say hi. That's the next generation. When we set up SICSS for Tykes, you know, it's our first submit. I don't know if you saw that in the chat box, but I wrote job opportunities. Send us the job post for #Emory. There are people out here needing jobs. All right. Can you, I think that was everybody again. Can you give us some advice? What advice would you give to attendees? Like, what do you wish you'd known on day one? Last year, you're just coming out of Praxis to Power. You're a little salty, like, why'd you take my weekend? You know, but that was still fun. You know, what advice would you give to people who are just embarking on this journey? And I should tell you that we're at 100% attendance on day 3. We are still the site that has the greatest attendance and consistency, and we are doing that again this year. So, what advice would you give them?
So I'm going to steal advice that Annette gave us last year, which is to kind of do this at your own pace, kind of let the information wash over you. As I think Maxine said as well, when it comes time to do your project, you'll have to go back and retool and learn some things, but really getting this exposure is the most important. And so let it wash over you, try not to let it overwhelm you, just kind of get exposed to everything.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. Just sort of take it all in as much as you can. Write the things down that really interest you, even if it's like one little sentence that you heard that you thought, that really piqued my interest, or this person's research idea seemed really cool. I think I want to come back to that. Just write things down.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and what I would give first as well. I think even as somebody who came in having worked as a data scientist and doing primarily quantitative work, it is like drinking from a fire hose because there's just so much information that is out there and it all seems so interesting. And that's okay. I think what's really useful to keep in mind is that this is like the starting of, whatever point you are in your journey. It's a starting point for relationships. It's a starting point for being exposed to these things. And if like after a day or a week, you don't feel like you have now become the master of the universe in whatever topic it is, that's a-okay. I just downloaded a bunch of things. So I've got sample code and, relevant, documentation and useful things if I am able to weave this into my research personally, but it's always a starting point, and feeling like things are a little bit overwhelming is completely okay and sort of the only way it could be, because these things are hard and worthwhile, and it's impossible to achieve mastery or feel like what's going on in a week for things that are hard and important. And another thing that I would say is to try and think about prioritizing. There's it's going to feel like if you feel like you need to do everything, it's easier to get overwhelmed. And I think I tried to be exposed to everything, but think like, oh, is there an idea or a hook here that I can, particularly think about? And that kept me sort of excited and engaged because I had something to come back to, and that I was prioritizing as like, I want to take this forward in a concrete way. And so I think those are really important things that I took away, or that I wish I had known. And even though I sort of heard, I wish I had taken seriously more at the time, so to speak.
beautiful advice from all. And I would like to add on a reminder that we record everything. So, you know, people feel like they need to sit and like, oh my God, like burning a hole in the paper, taking notes, but you can just go back and watch the video again. You know, what was that point that Felix said, you know, or you know, what was that organization that Todd mentioned, you know, Janeria said something about a job opportunity or a new program at Emory. Shout out to Emory that is founding, what does it say here? A new PhD program in AFAM studies. We need to shout that out and get her some good students. You know, what is it that Regina added? And I'd like to encourage you all to reach out to these folks. You have their email addresses and ask for more advice. I mean, maybe y'all want to put together a sheet of advice on killing the SICSS. You know, that could be interesting too. I'm trying to get y'all working together. So I'm starting to see hands in the chat box, of course, from our alumni TFs, but I'd love to see some of our participants in there too. I have 2 more questions. Oh, there's a third. There you go. Thank you. So another question, how has participating in SICSS shaped your career and or your research afterwards? I know some of you have touched on this a little bit. Some of that is collaboration, the people you've kept in touch with. Maybe you felt bold enough to jump into a new area or try a new technique. Tell us about how, how this has shaped you post.
I guess I can start this time, maybe. I think the most concrete way is that I really, connected with and found, I think, useful crossover with some of the specific tools. And I'm still working on exactly how I want to like develop and finalize these projects, but I really did try to get into the automated text analysis stuff. And so just in the sense that the classes and the content were very useful, well put together and sort of inspiring for research ideas. It gave me like a concrete idea for trying to get through a common problem in the space that I work in, where there's a lot of unstructured text information about narratives and things that are happening in communities that it's hard to tell systematic stories about. And that's something that I always saw as a big challenge, but didn't really have constructive steps forward for. And I left with that, and I'm still sort of working on incorporating that into my work. And hopefully something will come out soon related to that. But I think that was one of the ways that it changed me, is that it just really gave me concrete tools that I had not engaged with before.
And I think before my colleagues jump in, I want to mention a thought I had earlier, which is you're going to be overwhelmed with how many ideas you have. So you're going to be like, I can work with you, I can work with you, I can work with you, I can do this. And I just want to encourage you to write them all down, because you may come up with your research your research agenda for the rest of your career this 2 weeks, and have people to collaborate with for the rest of your career. I said you could always go back and watch the videos, but I think a good thing to burn a hole in the paper on is ideas and people you want to work with. All right, so who wants to jump in next and answer that question?
So I can go. So for me, I've always worked with quantitative data, demographic data, census data, but I always felt like something was missing, especially in terms of the kinds of stories that I could tell. And so being able to think about analyzing Twitter and discourse and the importance of culture, it's something that I'm still trying to figure out how to jump over there. I have my idea, I'm on the tenure track, so balancing those 2 things, but it definitely highlights where I want to go next. And I think it's something that's much more exciting and much more fulfilling than some of the work that I've been doing before, some of the methods I've been using.
I would say the same. It's kind of changed or affected the methods that I used, not so much the questions that I've been asking, with the exception of the project that I'm doing with Kimberly Baxter, which is totally outside of what I usually do. So I study sound and not like structure of sentences or words or things like that. So I have a different project that's in linguistics, but outside of what I usually do. But really the methods that I've been using in my dissertation have changed. And then the kinds of jobs that I'm considering has also changed. I hadn't really considered careers in tech or tech startups, but I've learned that I do have skills that are useful. And even attending SICSS has given me some basic skills that a lot of people don't have, when combined with my specialty knowledge, has made me a lot more marketable than I was before.
So I'm going to give Rumesa a chance to get her camera set. We're going to spotlight her to ask our first question. Before I do that, I want to mention to you, Maxine, with the goal of networking, you should watch or come to Kyla McMullen's talk. So her whole presentation is on sound as data. And she also does stuff with brainwaves. And she's also one of our speakers for interrogating the metaverse. So please plan to come and ask questions and such. She's fire. She's also the first PhD in computer science Black woman from Michigan, which is both very exciting and also Michigan do better. All right, Rumesa, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. For me, the reason behind like joining this workshop was like learning R. But thank you for you. Like it is more than that now. All the network and everything, I'm really enjoying it, and it gives me a lot. Like, but I have a bad thing. I'm feeling like at some point I will feel like, yeah, I'm really like learning R. I really get the logic behind it. I'm really engaged in R. Currently, I'm feeling like I am the beginner R. And then actually this is the second workshop I'm learning R, but I'm kind of thinking maybe this way of this expecting this kind of feeling that I'm really engaged in R is kind of, maybe I shouldn't feel like that, but I'm really wondering how you experience this process. For me, how long does it take to feel like really engaged? Or maybe we should stop thinking like that. I don't know. I just want to learn that.
I can jump in. I use R a lot in my work day to day. And I started using it not because it was actually taught structurally in a course or a program or like I was told to use it. People were telling me to use Stata or MATLAB or other things in coursework. And I switched to R because I thought it would be something that was much more useful for just collaboration. It's open source, and it's something that was just going to be more accessible to do and collaborate with. And so I did it without a ton of support at first. And I think as somebody who's learned a few different statistical programming languages, the thing that I will always say is I've taken online classes and seen like boot camps and what have you. Jump into a project that you care about, and like that is the way you will learn the most. I think hands down, there's nothing that compares to that. There's also, I say I know R, I've taught people R, but I probably know like 5% of like what R, contains in its entirety. It's an open source programming language that is growing and changing all the time. And so I think that point comes when you feel comfortable that you know how to learn more. You have resources that you're confident you can look back to if you feel like you can grow in it. So I think everybody Googles everything constantly, even people who have been using R for years and don't go into these situations feeling like, I know that if you lock me in a room with no internet, I can write perfect code. I don't think anybody works that way in kind of any language. And if you haven't hit that point, it's not a deficiency on your part at all. I think it's just like, do I feel confident that I can ask my questions and do the things that are common for my work, which may not be the things that are common for your work, which may not be the things that are very relevant. I do a lot of regression analysis in R. Many people never do regression analysis in R, for example. And so I think it's kind of like knowing what slice is relevant to you and then getting confident with that. And also just knowing that it's a permanent learning process, even for the person who is like, teaching people R or who is super experienced. And so feeling like that, it's still a learning process for you is not a bad thing at all.
Before our other two panelists weigh in, anybody, the two of you wave your arms if you want to say something. I wanna just mention that, oh, you waving your arms there, Janeria? Heck yeah, okay. So let me just, let me add one quick comment and then I'll pass it over to you. So I think one of the things that's helped me deal with my own anxiety with regards to learning new languages and new methodological toolkits is to imagine that I am managing the team that is doing the work. And I'm like, I need to know what I don't know so I can ask good questions. And I need to be able to like, that's wrong. So if I give myself that ability to imagine I'm putting the team together and I'm managing them, then it makes it easier for me to go to people and say, I don't know how to do this and ask questions. So I enter into these spaces saying, maybe I have the capacity for mastery, A lot of times, you know, we don't all have that. Our brains work in different ways, but who can I go to and get help with? So if you give yourself that space and grace to be good at some things, not good at others, and figure it out. So Janeria, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in as someone who still considers himself an R novice. I just wanted to second what Felix said about like getting on a project. That to me was the biggest learning curve and the most useful. And so like, I'm still saving resources. I have saved the resource Maxine just used. It's a learning process, but I think getting on a project is really useful. So as you go into the speed dating, make sure that you're on a project that uses the different skills that you really want to learn. I think that's one of the most important things.
All right, I'm speaking slowly in case Maxine wants to jump in.
Oh, I feel like there's always something to say about learning R. I also struggled. I took a stats class my first year, ended up dropping out because R was too hard. And then I used this book that I posted in the chat, Modern Dive, over the summer. And it's just so excellent. It's written for somebody. It's like, how do you describe a smartphone to somebody who's never used a smartphone before? That's the level it's written at. And so it's really wonderful. But I think coming back to it multiple times, trying things, taking some code from somebody else, like a skeleton code or maybe some of their code, and manipulating it is a great way to learn. But know that you're always going to be learning R. I've been using it now for a couple of years, and I'm like, oh, I have to do something new. I have to learn that every time. I have to learn it.
And I'll remind you all that Evan and Jesus, oh no, sorry, it wasn't Jesus, Evan and Jose are here and willing to support. So you have their email addresses and contact information. Jose is going to kick me for that when he's in my program at Berkeley. Reach out and ask them questions. You also have alumni, you will have TAs all next week. I'm hoping people will ask about their experiences with our Mathematica TAs. So you're going to have people to help you all next week. Every day. So I'm going to pass the mic to Regina. Regina, you're going to ask our next question. We'll do Regina, Todd, then Renee. Regina, oh, there we go. Regina, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So the question I have is for the group is, did you come in with any specific project in mind, and whether or not you did, how did you find ways to apply what you were learning in real time?
So I had no specific project in mind. I just came in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and trying to soak up. I really did try to drink from the water hose. I didn't. I was really interested in the technical skills and meeting people and seeing what kinds of projects other people were working on. This was the first time I've been in such an interdisciplinary environment where, you know, we were put in a breakout room with people from all different backgrounds, and we had to come up with one research question. And so I just let myself be open to all of that without any specific agenda in mind.
I was kind of in the middle. So I had data that I was very interested in using, but I didn't really have a research question. I think there was just something that I was interested in terms of data science. And then at the end, by the time we did, again, the speed networking, I was able to put those pieces together with some of the techniques that I had learned. And it kind of all came together in a really nice way.
I think I had a lot of concrete projects on the mind because I was like deciding what my dissertation chapters would be across the projects that I'd been, working on over time. So I didn't come in necessarily thinking, oh, like I want to, do something specifically at SICSS, but I think I had a lot of projects and data sets and sort of things in mind because it was at that time. And then I think I found it great to be in an environment where I was being exposed to a lot of new ideas and tools because it helped me find intersections. It's like, oh, this thing that seemed like a roadblock before, now I have a thing that helps me go back. And so I'm like actually more interested in engaging with this data set that I knew about, but seemed unwieldy, but is now less unwieldy because text doesn't scare me as much, for example. and doing the exercises on Twitter and stuff made it like a lot more reasonable that I might be able to get something out of these police reports, for example, which is one of the types of data that I was aware of, but was kind of ignoring the narrative bits in favor of the things that were more easy or standard for me to work with because there were more structured data. So I definitely had areas that I was planning to dig into more. And one of the things that I wish I would have done, and I think I was just caught up in the sort of dissertation finishing hustle, was I wanted to break completely new ground. And I wanted to be in maybe even different policy areas that are adjacent to what the places that I study. And I think I didn't do that quite as much as I would have if I wasn't like in the sort of stressful period of trying to bottom line a ton of projects. And if I were, say in SICSS right now, I think that's something that I would have tried to lean into more, of coming in with less preconceived notions about what I wanted to do or get out of it, and being open to the experiences and to like the new ideas that this kind of space can generate, and kind of only this kind of space can generate.
So I want to mention to you, Felix, so you may want to watch our workshop. So the person who ran it this year, Evan, used to work at the D Lab at Berkeley, and he took a job at that other school that's in the Bay Area that will remain nameless as their data science librarian. And I believe the data set that they looked at had to do with policing. So you may want to connect with him. He could be a great colleague. I also want to echo, before Todd takes over and asks the next question, something important that Felix said. So I arrived in my doctoral program at Berkeley with data sets on whistleblowers and interest in privacy, and the phenomenal and amazing and well-known and just deeply kind Michael Buravoy told me, he said, how sad would it be for you to come in here and do exactly what you set out to do and leave and not be affected by this incredible environment and these people. So I think it's a balance, because my dissertation is on privacy and my master's paper is on whistleblowers. So I think it's a balance, but allow this all to wash over you and take it in and think about the ways that you can be changed by it. So Todd has our next question, then Renee, then Susanna.
Yes, my question is something I think Annette alluded to, which is, how did you use the office hours with the Mathematica TAs to either enhance your skills or move projects forward?
I could also say, how do you wish you used the Mathematica TA office hours to enhance your skills and learn things? Go for it. Either question is fine.
I don't have strong memories of using, I think we used office hours one time when we were really stuck on, I forgot what day it was. I remember it being very helpful because we had somebody who could actually walk through the code with us and explain it to us, or walk through a concept. I do wish I had used it a little bit more, just a little more, especially during the time where we had time to work on our own projects. I think Kimberly and I both, we kind of have similar levels of computational skills, and we were getting stuck and kind of just wanting to learn by experience. And so we really struggled, and I think we could have used office hours a little bit more. We were also both very tired by the towards the end of the 2 weeks. And so I think our drive to go to office hours is a little bit lower. And so I wish I had spent more time at that point when we were working, we had time to work on our own projects. I wish I had spent more time in office hours just working through what we were struggling with, rather than just trying to learn by struggling.
I feel like my memory is also a little hazy, but I know that I called them into the room several times whenever I got stuck. And then one thing that I did in terms of when we got to our small working groups for our particular projects, we spent a lot of times focused on, okay, so what skills do we need for this project? And so we would say, make sure that we knew how to do those things. And so we worked through that. And whenever we got stuck, we would call someone in. And so we wanted to walk away with at least a base understanding of how to do those things. That was our big picture.
Yeah, I think I probably didn't take as much advantage of office hours as I could, but I think that one resource that was prepared ahead of time that was hugely useful is the sort of exercises serve as basically example code. And when I was doing text analysis myself using different data sets and all these kinds of things, like I used that as a starting point. And I think I have all of the code that was produced in SICSS saved somewhere on my computer and have referred to it over and over. I think sort of as a corollary to my comments about getting better with coding and that kind of thing, one of the ways that and I think many other people get faster and more efficient with coding is you just have code that you've already written that does things that you can draw on, rather than like, oh, I have memorized exactly how this works. It's like, I know I did this 6 months ago. I don't know exactly how, but it saved somewhere. And so, you know, saving everything in a way that's somewhat organized and you can find things is a huge thing, and having examples is a huge thing. And I've drawn heavily from the work that the TAs did ahead of time to develop these exercises. And so like in my own actual research, the skeleton came from SICSS work. And so that's something that I definitely took away.
Can I just add one quick thing on that about using code and saving your own code? Use R Markdown for everything. If you're not using R Markdown, switch to it. If you aren't sure what it is, go see the Mathematica TAs or any TA about that, because that'll save your life.
So I know that Todd actually has a comment about this. He wants to offer some advice to our alumni legacy TF for the day, but I want to add a comment real quick. So if you didn't realize, the Mathematica TAs that are present with us each day starting tomorrow are experts on the topic. They are professional data scientists. So if we're looking at like digital surveys, they like are incredible on that. So make sure you take advantage. We are the only site with professional TAs that support us. That is because of Mathematica. And I just want to remind y'all that all of us get a little annoyed when our students not come to office hours. Like, we're sitting in the office by ourselves. Why aren't they coming? They come see me right before the exam. So don't be that person, okay? Please take advantage of our office hours. Mathematica is paying for the time of all of these people. Go talk to them. All right, Todd, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say that the Mathematica TAs were super helpful. I was in Janera's group and we had questions on web scraping, and like to Nanette's point about, you know, you go through this experience, you don't necessarily do all the things that you expect to do, but it affects you. And so in my master's thesis, completely unrelated, didn't come in with it, but like I was able to use the web scraping code that we worked through with the Mathematica TAs, and it was basically like a PDF file of the data that I needed that my partner like couldn't give me because there was all this red tape. And I was just like, actually, here's a PDF. I actually know how to do it. Whereas before I would say, oh, this is not machine readable. Like, this is a loss. I can't work with it. So they're really helpful. They're also just really nice and really patient. So I think at the end we sent like a thank you note to our Mathematica TA. So I would recommend utilizing them.
Thank you, Todd. Renee is up next. And just so you know, folks, the first week our Mathematica TAs are with us at very specific times. The second week they're on call. So you'll have all their email addresses and you can reach out and say, come meet with us in Zoom. Can we talk to you about this? And they'll help to support your projects. All right, Renee, take it away. Go
Hi.
Bears.
Thank you all for being here. This is more of just a logistics question for Janeria. When you mention the African American Studies program being started at Emory? I have an undergrad who's just graduated who's interested in a PhD in African American Studies. So I was just wondering, just to get some more information to share.
Yes, please tell us all about the program. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's we'll be accepting applications in the fall, and feel free to have your student reach out to me. It's a truly interdisciplinary program. The department really pushed to have social scientists in the last couple of years, and so everywhere from humanities to social science or some combination in between. There are people that are there and in the program to work with, but I'm also happy to answer any specific questions that people have. But it's truly an interdisciplinary program. So for people who don't feel like they might quite fit in sociology or in something else, or they want to do a combination, this is the program for you.
Thank you so much. And you have Dr. Easley's email address, so please reach out. Susanna, next question. Let's get those hands up, folks, if you have questions. Be brave, be bold, jump in and ask.
Well, thank you for, sharing your experiences with us. My question is mostly, how do you, and Nanette was briefly touched on this, but I would like you to expand, that how do you allow yourself flexibility to expand your horizons in my case, for instance, I don't know about like web scraping and all that, and I'm like very eager to learn, but the part that is harder for me to be flexible about is like my topic area of interest. I'm very interested in immigrants and health, and so how do you allow yourself to be more flexible and engage with topics that are not your area of expertise, and how do you push yourself to more interdisciplinary work?
So I have a number of thoughts on this. I study public policy, which I think is supposed to be more interdisciplinary than it is. And it's something that I've sort of strived to do more. But there are real challenges to it, in that you can't be an expert in 5 disciplines to then use them all in your paper necessarily. That just takes a lot more time. And so I think I'm one of the few people in even my policy department that had people from different disciplines on their committee, right? One of my people on my committee was a sociologist, but I also had economists and other folks, somebody with a policy PhD. And one of my person who I'm doing my postdoc with, Professor Sandra Smith, is a sociologist who does qualitative work. Yeah, Sandra Smith is great. We poached her from Berkeley, which is like the only good thing Harvard has ever done, I think. But that's a separate conversation. And she does a lot of qualitative work, and she's incredible at what she does. And I do a lot of quantitative work, and we've had to figure out how to collaborate in a way that makes sense. I think I've found it really valuable to know what I bring to the table. And then know that projects require much more than that, and it's one piece of the pie. Often we have a tendency, I think, to find projects that fit our skills and say, well, this is what I can do, or this is what the other people who all have the same training as me can do, so we're going to do this project that's limited, and say, for future research, look at X, Y, and Z. Or, we weren't able to figure out the mechanisms because that would have required talking to people, and I obviously don't talk to people. I do data sets, or whatever the limitation is. And I think the work gets bigger when you do that, and it's not necessarily something that you have to hold yourself. But collaboration, I think, is really a really key piece of that forward. So one example that I'll share is my advisor and I have both looked at policies related to non-prosecution from different angles, and I've looked at sort of doing policy evaluations of what the impact of these non-prosecution policies have been, and we're expanding that work. But in terms of understanding what those experiences are like for people who go through these courts and have their cases handled by offices that are, implementing these policies, that's a really big piece of it that really speaks to mechanisms that could be at work that explain why it has or doesn't have the impact you might think it does. And so we collaborated in the sense that we look at it from different angles, but even on the qualitative piece, I was able to help, put together basically a matching protocol to do sort of paired interviews that find people who are more likely to, look similar on paper, but had different experiences likely to do these policies. And that's something that sort of has a sort of quasi-experimental sort of theoretical underpinning, and I was able to implement it by doing some propensity score stuff and then using quantitative data sets to then generate a list of people who will be spoken to in interviews by people who specialize in that. And so I'm not going to say that I have the training to go and do that qualitative work with the level of care that it needs to be done without substantial more work on my part, but I was able to be a piece of that. And she was able to change her sort of interview methodology to be one that is going to, I think, be robust and something that people from a variety of backgrounds will see as very credible because we sort of joined forces to get that piece of it done. So I think that helped me be adjacent to and learn from research questions that might be a little bit afield for somebody with my training, just because we don't specialize in that, but now it's been incorporated into things that I care about. Another thing that I will say is, at least in my area, and I think many other interests or areas of interest, things are very related, right? I think you like keep peeling back the layers of things, and eventually you get to a point where it's like, I can't just think about what courts and police are doing, because the things that we should be doing instead, for example, live in other areas, they touch on other policy areas. And so letting those sort of built-in linkages be the thing that moves you from place to place. So I don't feel like I'm just randomly saying, now I'm like interested in trade policy, like what's going on with oil prices, but, sort of like moving, a field, but in a way that still feels authentic to me, and that still allows me to leverage the understanding that I spent a ton of time building, but to move away in that space. So I think I always see things like labor and education is very closely related to what I'm doing in the criminal legal system. And those are areas that I've taken some time to learn and understand, and I'm hoping that my research will catch up to those things. But I think having those linkages and knowing that they're there and being open to them when they come up, and even if they're not named as such, like keeping a list of like, I keep running into this wall where like, this agency isn't equipped to handle this, and like who should be, or what's the missing piece of that conversation is like, I think what I let move me. So I'm not sure if that's really helpful. It's going to be different in every policy area, but I think those linkages are always really there,
I have a quick comment, and I want to give our two other panelists to decide if they want to comment on this, but we're going to have Todd and Amber, who are getting our last two questions in, ask their questions together so we make sure that we get them in. So since you brought up Sandra Smith, who I love dearly, I have to tell you, it was painful to watch my one alma mater steal one of my favorite people in the department from my other alma mater. The fact that she left Berkeley, went to Harvard, made it okay, but it still hurt. And I also have to tell you, I have to share with you one of my favorite stories from my time at Berkeley with regards to Sandra Smith and Jose, who helped out with your R workshop. So his first semester, he came up to me and he said, hello. And I was, trying to practice, being walking with authority. And he walked up to me, he's like, Professor Smith, I just need to let you know that I'm so glad that you are our chair and I love your research. And I'm like, I will take that. I will take that you think I am walking in a way that makes you think I'm a full professor, because I'm hella old, and that's okay. So I gotta share that story. Please say hello to Sandra for me. I hope to see her soon. All right, let's get our final two questions in. So Todd, can you share your question? And then Amber, can you share yours? We've got 9 minutes left. We want to give our speakers a chance to answer your questions. So
yes, I am voicing over for Demetrius Murphy, who is a SICSS alum who was on the panel last year. His question was, how do you maintain connections with SICSS and SICSS-Howard-Mathematica after the program?
I had two questions. The first one was, how are you guys measuring your progress with R when it's like almost impossible or difficult to like actually memorize code? So like, how do you make sure that you're progressing, and how do you really feel like you're progressing with R? And then my other one was like, given that we only have 2 weeks, do you have any suggestions for making the most out of our time? Any benchmarks that we should have for like week 1 or week 2?
So I can touch on all three. So keeping in touch with other SICSS alum. I use social media, so I'll do Twitter. I'm on Instagram quite a bit. The Slack is off and on. Sometimes people will post things, so we kind of stay in touch on Slack. But if I'm in someone's area and I know they live there, I'll just reach out to them. I had coffee with Meredith, who's in Boston now, and I was in Boston this summer, and it was awesome to meet in person. So I'll just hit people up, like write them a message, slide into their DMs. I have no shame. And in terms of measuring progress with R, I don't really ever sit back and think about where my progress is. I just base it on the project. Did I have the skills needed to do this project? Was I able to get the project done? Was I able to figure out who had those skills and could ask questions or get some code? People love sharing their code. I mean, not everybody, most people love sharing their code. And so it's not really about how comfortable I feel with the language. It's about getting my projects done. And then in terms of getting the most out of SICSS, I think what is the most is different for everybody. And so being very intentional about what your goal is. Are you here to get technical skills and really practice? Then do that. Are you here to get a project? You want to collaborate and do something that's either different than what you usually do or expand on what you usually do, or find collaborators for the topics that you're interested in. Set your intention and work on that. That's what I think what getting the most out of SICSS is going to be. Whatever your intention is, if you reach that.
And so I'll say, I know I've been talking about the speed dating a lot. It's clearly left an impression on me. So we were supposed to pick one project, but I kept track of the other projects that I was interested in. And so I have like another project with Elaine that we haven't made a lot of progress on, but we're both still interested in, and maybe we'll also apply for some extra funding. So keep track of those different interests. And I also kind of wanted to go back to Renee's question, because I ended up on projects that were very different from what I usually do. And so when I came into SICSS, I came in because I was interested in school ratings, but I was interested as a parent and someone having to make these decisions as a parent. And then the other project that I got into was because, you know, I feel like the pandemic impacted us all in different ways, just having a lot of questions about COVID and COVID discourse and disinformation. And so I let some of those other interests that usually don't get to come into my more traditional research, I gave space for that. So be open to that as well. And I think it relates to what Maxine was just saying, because being able to do those projects was just, okay, so Susanna, so sorry about that. But yeah, being able to do those projects and get it done and having the skill sets to get it done is how I measure my progress.
I will try to be quick because I've talked a lot. I think one thing I wanted to say about measuring progress in R, I definitely co-sign that projects are the thing. You know, R is a tool, and if it's helping you get your work done, then you're doing the right things. Another thing that I would say I keep in mind, because I never find it super valuable to say I'm going to memorize. You know, it's nice to know the commands that you use regularly, for example, but like memorization is not really something that I think is super useful. I think knowing about the levels, or sorry, the broader like meta concepts that are important when you're doing coding projects, and like being able to manage like all of the pieces of what that entails. So whether that's like security and documentation, I know I think Maxine mentioned like using R Markdown and thinking about that, and like data visualization and how to integrate those things. Knowing that there are tools available and maybe thinking about those. GitHub collaboration tools, like those are the sort of pieces that I start adding to my repertoire as I, get more comfortable with, say, doing the main analysis. And so that's like a way to measure your progress in R, where that's not like, have I memorized all of the different commands, but like, do I feel comfortable going into projects that involve some data security or that will need to produce some sort of like high quality visual output or whatever? Do I know what tools are available there? So that's, I think, like a sort of maybe a different way of thinking about progress in R versus like, have I memorized things? So I'll just leave it at that, because I think we're running out of time, but I wanted to chime in with that.
I wanted to give you all a chance to give closing thoughts, but Renee has a question that piggybacks. So Renee, jump in.
Yeah, really, really quick. Just off of what we were talking about, is there any strategy in terms of saving? Because you said that like you save the code. So do you have any strategy in terms of like saving as we go along?
I do. I'm very diligent about saving my code. So everything I do, I have an R Markdown for pieces of every project. So if you don't know, it's an RMD file. And again, I think one of the TAs can show you how to work on that, but you can put text and code, and you can have it output to a PDF or like knit to a PDF, or knit to HTML is going to be a little bit easier, because then you don't have to do any extra things. But it gives you an opportunity to comment on all of your code. So I will literally write, here, you're doing blah, 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 and this line does this, and don't forget that you need to do this. And so I just give myself directions. And even if I don't save chunks of code that are useful separately. So like I don't have, for example, a file that is some visualization that I like. I put that code within that project in my RMD file. So I might have that code repeated on multiple different projects, but I like to save my projects commented out on their RMD files.
I don't have much to add besides this is, I think, maybe a more advanced thing, and it's not specific to R, It works for any coding language that you're doing, but it's huge for collaboration, and that is GitHub. Using that, it's sort of version control, and that's a whole separate thing. There's great resources for how to integrate that with R. But if you are very serious about documenting especially with larger projects or collaborative projects, that's probably a couple of hours that it's worthwhile to spend getting familiar with how to use Git.
We have literally 1 minute left. I can hear the chimes across the street from the church. Closing thoughts, speakers that fit within a minute so we can end on time. Go. Someone go.
I think I'll just say this is a unique space in a lot of ways. Probably, I don't know what your home departments are like, but it seemed like that for me. And so I was just very much like, what is this place's comparative advantage? What can I get out of it? And keeping an eye on what makes, SICSS-Howard-Mathematica specifically special is important. You guys know what those things are. And so take those things away.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very special place. And I think for all of us who went last year, it was a very special memory for us and really meaningful. And so I would just say, stay interested and stay open.
And I'll just say quickly, I remember describing the program as a restorative space, and it's hard to come across those spaces in academia. So I really appreciate that. Connect with each other on social media and connect with us as well.
And hopefully we'll see you all for our data assurance next on Friday. Hope we see you all, our alums for data assurance. You're all invited. Thank you all for watching. For more information on SICSS-Howard-Mathematica, visit our website, follow us on social media, and join our email list.